Yes,
Well, good
please.
morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Cohen, and I'm a board member here at the Board of Trustees member for the New Jersey Business Immigration Coalition. I am also the Senior Business Development Officer here at Choose New Jersey, New Jersey's leading business attraction organization. Choose New Jersey is also a proud member of this organization. So it is my privilege to welcome all of you to today's vital policy discussion. As you may know, the coalition is dedicated to the pursuit of sensible, evidence based, and bipartisan immigration policy. Our work, we believe, takes a greater importance in the current environment when misinformation on immigration matters is widespread, when efforts to drastically reduce immigration are underway, and when many immigrants are experiencing doubts about the future promise of America. My organization, Choose New Jersey, has a special interest in this topic because we promote New Jersey around the world as an ideal place for resettlement of diverse peoples and for the introduction to internationally sourced businesses. As part of this effort, we try to encourage a smooth transition for skilled immigrants seeking to resettle in our state. We have identified some of our services that we think are critical in this area, and we hoped that this kind of discussion taking place here today will move our state in the right direction. Before we kick off today's webinar, I'd like to give a great thanks to a number of groups helping to make this webinar possible. In case you don't know this event is a joint activity of the Coalition and the New Jersey Business and Industry Association, NJBIA. Our partnership is called the New Jersey Immigration Policy Institute, reflecting our commitment to educate the public on important immigration matters and to use the best research to guide us in this process. Also like to thank a board member also of Choose New Jersey, but the law firm of Genova Burns. Diversity and community service aren't just words, they are the hallmark of this law institution. Before I introduce the first speaker, I'd like to remind our audience that we've set aside about 15 minutes at the end of today's program to respond to any questions, comments that you may have. We encourage you to put your questions and comments in that little box down on the bottom in the chat box. When they pop into your head, we'll make sure we try to get to them at the end as we continue to move forward with today's program. So the topic we are covering today has enormous implications on the future of our economy and for the livelihood of millions of people. Our first speaker, Asma Isa, has much knowledge and experience relevant to this topic we are covering. She is a senior manager for state and local initiatives of the American Immigration Council. Through its research efforts, the council has published numerous studies and reports on various aspects of immigration policy. The council also devotes much attention to local impact of immigration, which is Asma's area of expertise. We've asked her to join us to provide us with an economic benefits of this kind of reform that's being introduced in many states. Asma, thank you for joining us today, and I will turn the floor straight over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you everyone for joining us today. If you can just give me a moment, I'll start sharing my slides. Okay, well, thank you so much for everyone for joining us this afternoon. And thank you to the New Jersey Business Immigration Coalition for having me and hosting this webinar. And thank you for everyone's interest in this topic. My name is Asma Isa, and I'm the Senior Policy Manager of State and Local Initiatives at the American Immigration Council. So a little bit about the organization that I work for. The American Immigration Council works to strengthen America by shaping how the country thinks about and acts towards immigrants and immigration, and by working toward a more fair and just immigration system that opens its doors to those in need of protection and unleashes the energy and skills that immigrants bring. Some of you might be familiar with the New American Economy a few years ago in early 2022. The New American Economy, which I was a part of, merged with the American Immigration Council. And so the team that I work on is state and local initiatives. So this slide shows our state and local programs. Our first one that some people might be familiar with, which is Gateways for Growth, which the New Jersey Business Immigration Coalition has been a participant of this program. This program supports communities and on immigrant integration initiatives. Several months ago, we announced a new RFP for round six, and so we're currently going through applications for this round when we're hoping to announce a new cohort for this program by the end of the year. Another program we have that is nationwide is our Global Talent Chamber Network. And this is a nationwide Chamber of Commerce network of chambers of commerce that view immigrant integration as an economic growth strategy. Another program that we run in partnership with West Global Talent Bridge is called the Own a State Network that unites state leaders to advance immigrant integration. And our organization, along with Wes, offers technical support, peer learning, and research and economic benefits to these efforts. Currently, 23 states make up the network. And then the last area I'll speak to is our state business coalitions and compacts. So since 2019, the council has launched 8 business-led state compacts on immigration, and we have coalitions in the states of Texas, Colorado, and Ohio. These efforts really do, similarly to what the New Jersey coalition does, is uniting the business voices to promote immigration policies that boost the economy and attract global talent. Another portfolio that we have that isn't presented on the slide is our state legislative portfolio. So we do track and analyze state legislation that impacts immigration and immigrants in a variety of ways, but particularly in workforce development spaces. I'll speak to a little bit later about that. This map represents where we currently work. So since 2014, our team has worked in more than 100 local communities across 40 states. And we support with a myriad of things to bring together policymakers, businesses, civic leaders who recognize the economic and cultural and civic contributions of immigrants and refugees, peer-to-peer learning and advocacy opportunities. And we also help our partners champion welcoming policies and programs that create jobs, spur innovation, and drive economic growth for all Americans. And this is just a slide about our Global Talent Chamber Network that speaks to the work that we do with chambers of commerce. Some of the areas that we support them are similar to the areas that we support in our other initiatives, including support in DC fly-ins. And this is a map of our chamber distribution. As you can see in the map, there's a lot of interest from chambers in the Midwest in this work. Chambers of commerce are really finding this lane of work as an economic growth strategy and a workforce development strategy, and they're really starting to lean in more in federal and state and local immigration and immigrant integration programs and initiatives that support local economies. So just to get into some data, this is a big area that our organization works in. We have a lot of data that is free and publicly available online, and I can share the links to this after the webinar. This data is pulled from Map the Impact, which is our national data interactive. It's free and publicly available. On the top of the slide, you'll see some United States data, but more importantly, on the bottom is some data that shows contributions of immigrants in New Jersey. So in New Jersey, based on the year 2023, we found that 24.2% of the population are immigrants in the state of New Jersey, and they make up 30.1% of the labor force. There's over 2 million immigrant residents in the state, contributing nearly 40 billion to tax contributions, and they hold nearly 95 billion in spending power. Our data also shows that, as I mentioned, even though immigrants in the state of New Jersey make up 24.2% of the population, they make up 30.1% of workers and 43.6% of STEM workers in the state of New Jersey. So that is actually quite high compared to the ratio of the total population, but it's also quite high compared to the other states that we've seen in the country. So this is a really important statistic for the state of New Jersey. Immigrants in some key industries in New Jersey. So we found that 41.2% of immigrants work in transportation and warehousing industry, 40.9% work in construction, 37.4% in manufacturing, And then 28.6% of nurses are immigrants, and 48.4% of immigrants are
İnanmıyormuş.
home health aides
Nasılsın?
in the state of New Jersey.
Ne oldu, dersin yok mu? Dersin yok mu?
So, another area that we often look at when it comes to our data and how we support local communities, sort of analyze their local immigrant population, is looking at the entrepreneurship in the state. So, specifically in the state of New Jersey, immigrants are 36.7% of entrepreneurs in the state, and they generate nearly 5 billion in business income for the state. This is a really big marker that we can see they're contributing at a higher rate than they are playing of the total population. And then another area that we often look at in our data, and that's supportive of a lot of the partners' work that they try to do, is looking at the role that international students play in states. So specifically in the state of New Jersey, we found that over 23,000 students at colleges and universities were international students, and they contributed nearly 940 million in economic contributions and supported over 8,500 jobs in the year of 2023. And so the reason why I wanted to share a lot of these statistics out is the importance of how it is, the importance of supporting your immigrant population and their ability to enter the workforce. So one way that we have been seeing a lot of states take initiative in this space is looking at how to reduce barriers for licensing. And this is a place that can be done through at the state level through state legislation. One way to support internationally trained professionals enter the workforce in their trained expertise area is through state legislation that reduces these barriers. So many states have introduced and passed legislations, and then that creates programs and initiatives that reduce barriers for licensing. We've seen a big rise in this type of legislation over the past 3 to 6 years, especially amongst the healthcare fields. Particularly for internationally trained medical graduates and physicians. And some states that have done this quite well include Colorado, which we have a speaker from later this morning that can speak to the work that's being done in Colorado. But we view this kind of legislation as a win for states because when legislation is introduced and passed and it supports state and local employers in their ability to hire highly skilled professionals. It also reduces brain waste in the state and it opens up the candidate pool for high in demand jobs, especially in areas that we see that require licensing. Already we see in a lot of these highly skilled professions a low supply of qualified candidates. And when we are able to reduce the barriers of licensing and criteria needed to enter these occupations, the candidate pool increases and it has a trickle down impact for the draw and the global talent for that industry for the state as a whole. And the last thing that I wanted to speak to is one particular success story that we've seen in the state of Michigan. So, for example, there's a health research and care clinic in the state of Michigan called Banff Health. We recently visited this location about a month ago at our annual Global Talent Chamber Network convening that we partnered with Global Detroit and Grand Rapids Chamber. And so part of that experience, we took our attendees to go see this institution. And the reason why I share this story is it's a really beautiful story of how an immigrant came over to the States and started their expertise and their career in the United States as an international student. After he graduated, by many years, he was working for other facilities and he had an idea of starting his own facility that would do research and care. And so over the years, that individual has been able to open one-of-a-kind health institution and research facility in the state of Michigan. It's the only one in America, and I believe it only has a few other in Europe. And so they're currently in the process of not only opening other facilities in other cities, but they've also partnered with their local university in training local students and international students on how to gain the expertise that's needed to be able to work in the clinics that they manage, and they've been looking into opening up. And so through that story, it was a success story for us to see the pipeline of what is possible when barriers are reduced, and an individual that is an immigrant that might be highly trained or have access to education and licensing in their local state is able to become an entrepreneur, open a business. That creates job opportunities for the rest of the people in the community, but it also creates opportunities for other institutions and like-minded academic institutions that want to learn or grow from based on that. And so we see this as a growth area. And we do hope that people continue to consider how to look into ways of reducing barriers for internationally trained professionals to be able to enter their area of workforce so that they can benefit their local economies and industries, and also be able to contribute to the what's going on in that state. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Rachel. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to address them at the end of the presentation during Q&A, and also my email address is on the slide, and I'm happy to also share some links to our research that talks about licensing, the benefits of licensing, and some nationwide data if people are interested in.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Asma. That was really insightful. As part of what Choose New Jersey does is we go around the world and talk a lot about the why New Jersey is a great place to have businesses, have people who are looking to expand into the U.S. talk about businesses. And we clearly always highlight our largest concentration of scientists and engineers. And we are very known to, this number comes from immigrants coming into the state of New Jersey, continuing to find a home here as a state, but kind of giving back as entrepreneurs as well. So the data side of what you guys are doing is, to me is fascinating, but the numbers don't lie. So really, really thank you for all that information. I know that one of the questions was kind of talking about getting the PowerPoint, and I'm sure our team here can probably share that PowerPoint afterwards as well. So thank you. To move on, it's now my privilege to introduce the moderator of our panel, Catherine Gebra-Medin, who is the Director of State and Local Initiatives at World Education Services, WES, a nonprofit organization that provides credential evaluations for individuals with education obtained outside of the US and Canada. WES, as this is called, has expanded its mission beyond credential evaluations to support the educational, economic, and social integration of immigrants at a state and local level. Catherine leads this part of the expanded mission. She's also the person that helps put together today's program. So thank you for that. Catherine, thank you for helping us arrange today's webinar. Look forward to hearing what you and the distinguished group of panels have to say. So handing it over to you at this point.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Hi, everyone. Good to be here. My name's Catherine Gebra-Medin. Great job on the pronunciation. It's not an easy name. And as Rachel mentioned, I'm the director of our state and local team. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about WES. If folks have other questions, always happy to take those at the end. But one thing I did want to highlight about our work at WES before we get into our discussion is one thing that we really pride ourselves on as a national organization is the ability to convene folks and groups together that are doing really great work around the economic inclusion of immigrants and refugees. And in our role as convener, especially on my team, there's two kind of key programs that I just want to quickly talk about because most of our panelists, actually all of our panelists have been involved in those in some way, shape, or form, is we convene a group called the SIP network, which is part of a strengthening immigrant inclusion program that we've run out of WES since 2017. It's a network of over 45 communities across the country. New Jersey has participated. We could get some more participation in the future. The SIP program really is a collection of communities that work together to look for solutions for immigrants and refugees who want to use their skills and experience in the U.S. And in that program, we partner with every kind of entity from chambers to community colleges to state and local government. The other area that we convene that I think Asma already spoke to is With our partners at AIC, we convene the Office of New Americans Network. I think most folks know that you have an Office of New Americans in New Jersey that's doing some amazing things. Very proud of that office as I also live in New Jersey, even though I work nationally. And all of our panelists today are from states or within the offices of New Americans in their states. And the reason we bring those offices together is states have a really important role to play in immigrant inclusion. A lot of the data that Asma just mentioned really talks about the impact that immigrants can have on state and local economies. And so an Office of New Americans in a state really is playing that centralized role to really look across the board at needs and communities within those states. And so we have 23 states, as Asma mentioned, in the network, and also very happy to take questions about that. We're going to learn some more about those offices today. And before I go on to talk a little bit about our discussion today, just want to mention that WES also has a really great policy team that supports work across the country. Two areas that we really focus on are the expansion of offices of New Americans across the country. So we support states that are interested in opening offices. Luckily, that's already been done in New Jersey, so you can check that box. But another area that we really focus in on is reducing barriers to licensure. And that's what Asma spoke a lot about today. And there's quite a bit of momentum, as Asma mentioned, around healthcare professions. You actually have had a bill introduced this year in New Jersey around internationally trained medical graduates. And so we have a great policy team with expertise that can plug into folks here if you're interested in looking at reducing barriers. For some of these professions, we can always chat later. But enough about Wes and enough about my team. I really want to pivot the discussion over to some really amazing partners that I've had the pleasure of working with for a number of years. Again, Wes, as our role as convener, is really just bringing people together to discuss and learn from each other. And this is just a great group of humans who do this work and are very committed to it. And I think have a lot to share for New Jersey. So, we intentionally brought folks in from outside New Jersey so you get some learnings from around the country. I'm going to go ahead and just say who these all gentlemen are, and then I'm going to have each of them take about 5 minutes to talk a little bit about their work, and then we're going to go into some moderated question and answer by me, and we'll leave plenty of time for you to ask questions. So I'm just going to list you as I have you written. So Steve Tabachman, who's the founder and director of Global Detroit in Michigan. Sebastian Sanchez, who's the Deputy Secretary for Agriculture and Immigrant Workforce at the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency, and Anthony Cherinsky, who's the Global Talent Administrator at the Colorado Office of New Americans. And so I think we'll just go in that order. I'm going to pass it over to Steve to talk a little bit about his work in Michigan, and then Steve, you can pass to Sebastian, and then on to Anthony. So each take about 5 minutes just to talk a little bit about your work, and then we'll go into discussion.
Great. Thanks, Catherine, and thanks everybody for having us. Really excited to be with the New Jersey Business Immigration Coalition. Global Detroit, we are a nonprofit economic development organization. We're celebrating our 15th anniversary this year. We started at the Detroit Regional Chamber. We're an economic development organization. I know I said that. I have to say that several times to folks. Our big idea is that through the intentional inclusion of immigrants in our economic development strategies, policies, practices, and programs, we will foster economic growth, revitalization of the city, and a vibrant quality of life. Locally, what that looks like are a series of programs, a bunch that focus on skilled immigrants. We run the country's largest international student retention program. I love seeing Osma's numbers. In Michigan, it's 38,500 international students. What she didn't put in there is that 70% of all the graduate students in America in computer science, 70% of all the graduate students in America in electrical engineering are international students. Those are the top two in-demand fields for the auto industry to be the auto global leader. If we didn't have a talent strategy for that, we'd be missing the vast majority of the top talent that we could get. We do a startup program called Global Entrepreneurs in Residence that is launching in New Jersey that you guys just allocated state budget money for. Our neighborhoods team focuses on small businesses, on home ownership and asset building, and building social cohesion in a large African American city. And we continue to work locally around systems change, and that is research, communications, advocacy. We run Welcoming Michigan, which at one point had more declared welcoming communities in the state of Michigan, more welcoming counties, cities, townships than any other state in America, bar none. We also have grown to work on the state level. So some of the programs I just mentioned work statewide, and I will mention that in really working with the American Immigration Council, we created a statewide immigration compact in 2020, just before the shutdown. But our current governor, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, her major economic development initiative is called 60 by 30. 60% of the Michigan workforce would have a post-secondary degree or credential by the year 2030. When she announced this program in 2019, we were at 45%. According to the National Skills Coalition, which is somebody that we all work with nationally as well, we are the 41st state to have a post-secondary degree attainment initiative just like this. But we are the first state that, using that compact, a lot of the same members, we built a statewide coalition to advocate for intentional strategies that include immigrants in the 60 by 30 talent initiative. Those strategies include, I already mentioned, international student retention, skilled immigrant integration, which is what Catherine runs the SIP program. And so we are funding 5 local Michigan Works agencies to coach college-educated immigrants who are underemployed. This past year, we placed 80 people in jobs. The average salary was $88,000. We have a lower cost of living than New Jersey. The average salary increase for those workers was over $40,000. These are your pharmacists who are driving an Uber or electrical engineer who's working on a construction site. How do we get them into their professions? We do a whole bunch of other programs in that coalition. That coalition includes chambers, economic development organizations from across the entire state, from the Upper Peninsula to Traverse City, Grand Rapids, Flint, Midland, Saginaw, Detroit, Ann Arbor, Kalamazoo, everywhere in between, Lansing, 25 business organizations that have joined together that said we need talent. All of Michigan's population growth, whether you go back to 2020 or you go back to 2000, is in immigration. We set a very ambitious goal to double the number of college educated immigrants in terms of our growth rate, projected growth rate in 2019, so that we would add 125,000 college educated immigrants to the workforce by 2030 to meet this goal for the Michigan Global Talent Initiative. As of 2024, 5 years in, we were at 54,000, and we are on track to meet our goal. That means that in a state that is 7% foreign born, immigrants will comprise 28% of the population and workers needed to meet our workforce upskilling goals. This has been money that's been appropriated by Republican legislatures and then by a Democratic legislature. Sadly, once the federal funding has run out this past year, we did not get renewed funding. And so we are returning back to our partners in private philanthropy for a number of these initiatives, as well as finding individual opportunities. The second thing I want to say about our statewide program is that in January, we launched Businesses and People for Immigration. I'll put some of these things in the chat, but MichiganGlobalTalent.org is the Michigan Global Talent Initiative, and then forimmigration.biz is our campaign. So this is a narrative change campaign to help people know that immigration policy is economic policy and to help them know the facts about the contributions that immigrants make to our economy. There are legitimate debates that we need to have around humanitarian policies, around refugee and geopolitical policies, around securing our borders, and those debates should be had in a context of understanding the impact on our economy. That is an important part of the equation. So we have 445 signers of that, including about 12 chambers. And then lastly, I'm probably over my time, just want to talk nationally. We work nationally under what we call our e-pluribus program for over 10 years, we have co-led the Welcoming Economies program at Welcoming America. That is a program to help those who are doing broader welcoming work understand the things they could be doing around building welcoming economies. We run national networks around international student retention, around what we call global entrepreneurs in residence, and that's why I'm so familiar with your global EIR program. Those networks tend to meet monthly online. And we broadly bring together peer immigrant inclusive economic development initiatives like the Welcoming Center in Philadelphia and other places. We wrote a guide, which I'll also link in the chat, to help other states think about business immigration advocacy campaigns and how to launch them and what to think about in doing so. And in the coming months, we are about to partner with our friends at the Immigrant Research Initiative in New York City to come out with numbers on small business ownership that will help you look at, what percentage of trucking firms and grocery stores and restaurants are owned by immigrants, and it'll actually probably break it down by countries of origin, and you can see, within Mexican immigrants, what are the most common business ownership and those kinds of things. So great data that will help folks who want to do advocacy around immigrant small business. So I apologize if I've exceeded my time, and I'll yield it back to Catherine for the next speaker.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Sebastian, I think we can just go straight to you.
Thanks, Catherine. Appreciate it. And thank you again to the New Jersey Business Immigrant Coalition for having me on. I have been in California now for the past 11 years, but I was raised in New Jersey from age 5 to 19. I lived in New Jersey in Bergen County, Englewood, and then I went to law school in New Jersey. So really wonderful to join a New Jersey panel, even though I'm out in California. I am the Deputy Secretary for Immigrant and Agricultural Workforce at the state's Labor and Workforce Development Agency. We are an executive level agency that oversees 7 departments, boards, and panels, where we have 3 focuses on our work. One is enforcing state workforce workplace laws, delivering benefits like unemployment insurance, disability insurance, and paid family leave, as well as workers' compensation. And then the largest part of our portfolio is workforce development. We have 3 different entities that are really focused on this. The first is through our employment development department, we have the workforce services branch, through which most of our WIOA discretionary dollars are passed through, but we also have state-funded dollars that go through that agency. Then we have the Employment Training Panel, which is really focused on the incumbent workforce. And then we have the California Workforce Development Board, which works with local workforce boards to think through the strategies that we need on addressing the needs of employers at a local level. The agency itself also works closely with the governor's office. As Catherine mentioned, California does participate in the ONA network. We do not have an ONA, but we work different departments and agencies, collaborate with the governor's special advisor on immigration to make up our own ONA. And that way we collaborate with states across the country to really identify these best practices to address the needs of our immigrant populations. This means we work really closely with our governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, also known as GoBiz, to think through what are the needs. We collaborate with them on doing an assessment, for example, almost 2 years ago at this point, on what is that licensing landscape for skilled immigrants. And then we also just oversee the programs that our entities develop and produce. I think most relevant for today's conversation, and I'll talk in a little bit once Catherine takes us into the questions, is how we've been addressing the challenges that immigrants have in accessing licensing and credentials, whether it's through the language challenges that exist, whether there are other barriers to employment that are there, including language proficiency, including the limited access to workforce training opportunities, other social and cultural challenges that exist, and explicitly the challenges that folks that do not have employment authorization have to obtaining work. Also, there's been a particular focus in California on the healthcare industry and on the needs that we have for healthcare. So later on, again, I'll talk a bit more about some of the efforts that we've had in addressing that particular industry and how we've looked at professionals and how we've been been trying to support immigrant professionals in that industry to be able to obtain their credentials, to be able to obtain their learning hours in the state, and how we've been able to try to place them in on a pathway to be able to enter that profession in the state of California. So I'll pause there in terms of just a general introduction, and then we'll talk more specifically later on as we get into the conversation. Thank you, Catherine, and I'll pass it on to Anthony.
Thanks, Sebastian. So again, everyone, my name is Anthony Shawinski. So I'm the Global Talent Administrator in Colorado's Office of New Americans. Our Office of New Americans, or ONA, has existed since 2022. I've been here since day one, actually kind of pre-day one. And we operate out of the Department of Labor and Employment in Colorado. Our work is driven really with the intention to support the social, civic, and economic integration for all new Americans in Colorado. And I think something important to mention about our office is that we're set up so that we can also, in addition to being a state government office, we can also philanthropically raise funds to support our work, which has been really beneficial, obviously, lately. So since 2022, of course, we've responded to, supported in the response to the migration influx that we were experiencing. We've worked through the Department of Labor and Employment to establish policy, which led to an increase in state workforce programs reaching new Americans by over 16%. We established Colorado's International Medical Graduate Program. With our program, once folks finish the clinical readiness program, it's called, they then can apply for residency, and eventually the pathway leads to full board certification. And with our very first cohort, so we helped establish that establish a program. With that first group, 75% of the folks who participated applied for and are now participating in residencies in Colorado, and which is a really important thing to mention because there is some inherent risk with a bit of the design that we have created in Colorado for our International Medical Graduate Program. But the intention is for them to be full-fledged physicians, right, and board certified. But yeah, the great news for us was, like I said, 75% are participating in residencies in Colorado. Other things that we've done, through policy, we established a virtual and occupation-specific English language acquisition program, which had great outcomes, and the outcomes were so great that other agencies decided to fund it to keep it going and extend the program beyond its sunset. We've also established something called the Benefit Recovery Fund, which is a state-funded program, which essentially acts as unemployment insurance for folks who are undocumented. And we've done many things, I would say, but I'm going to keep it short. The last thing I'll say for now, so we can get into some questions, but last thing I'll say for now is we also have published a bipartisan developed global report, which was submitted to the General Assembly and Governor's Office, and that was called the Global Talent Task Force Report. Essentially, we took a high-level look at what the barriers were for new Americans who are seeking to get into various different occupations and industries. And as I said, we pushed out recommendations for the Governor's Office and General Assembly to consider. Much of that report actually is really, as I look back on it, has been driving my work and my current work, and will be driving future work as well. And yeah, so I'll pause there. But yeah, thanks for inviting me today. Happy to be here. And in terms of New Jersey, I've been to the airport and have ridden on a train there, and it was a wonderful experience.
That would be the AirTran, Anthony. So awesome that you had that experience. And thank you for sharing about the Colorado ONA. This is just a really tremendous group of folks here. Have been doing this work for a long time. I'm gonna cut right into some questions. And then yeah, we'll allow for some audience questions. What I can say is if folks just want to start chatting, anything that comes up while we're talking. I'll get to as many questions as possible. But when I go through some of these questions, I'll start taking from the chat. But if folks want to just go ahead and start asking questions, feel free. The ones we can't get to, I can likely pass on to our panelists and get some answers for you. But first question, and this is really for any or all of you who want to chime in. The work that we're all talking about and have been doing, it doesn't happen in one place. Whether you're based in government, whether you're based in a nonprofit organization, all of this work requires partnership with different stakeholders to get this work done. And knowing that we're speaking today to a business coalition that has a lot of multi-sector partners and their own ecosystems that they're working through. Would just love to hear from each of you if you want to share just any key lessons that you've learned doing this work with different stakeholders, and are there any best practices of this type of partnership work that you would recommend to colleagues in New Jersey that really want to grow in this space? So I'll pass it to whoever wants to answer first.
I'll be brief. I'll just say that I work with so many peers that, like Global Detroit, are building immigrant inclusion into economic development strategies and work. And so often, they do great at connecting with immigrant communities. And many of the practitioners come from advocacy and social service and job placement and workforce readiness programs around there. And we often struggle to, our international student retention program spends all its time trying to find businesses that are willing to hire this pool. So I have found that, working with business community, working with businesses is a really critical component of this work and essential. And it also, making sure that these kinds of programs speak the language of business, feel something different. I can't tell you how many times I want to take advantage of every opportunity we get at Global Detroit, but we're often placed with like these sort of special populations, right? That returning citizens, disabled persons, victims of domestic violence, trans LGBTQ populations. There's nothing wrong with being with those populations. They all have something to contribute. We see inclusion as a big tent issue. There's no doubt about it. But, when we represent 70% of the talent coming out of the graduate schools in the top two fields, I feel like there's a core economic component to the work that we're doing. When you look at the demographic numbers, there's so many talent initiatives in the economic development space, particularly in states like Michigan, that are like, if we could just capture what we call boomerangers, people who grew up here and left, and we want to bring them back. The numbers in terms of talent for the international community, the immigrant community, the international student community overwhelm many of those programs. And so this is a core economic development strategy, and your coalition represents the hardest element I think it is to build in a community, which is buy-in from the business community. And so I think you have the foundations of what can be really successful. And I think the rest of us can help you learn the specific practices that we've developed and help to adopt them. But what we can't do is build the relationships with businesses and the corporate leadership.
Yeah, I'll jump in if that's all right, because I'm really going to be echoing what Steve's saying. But before I echo, I'll say from a state agency perspective, something that that someone told me before jumping into this role was that people want to work with the Office of New Americans in state agencies, but they don't necessarily know how to work with the Office of New Americans. That very simple statement rings true and is burning my ears almost on a daily basis. And I say that because there are so many folks and colleagues across state agencies who, yes, do want to support new Americans and believe in the impact that immigrants have on our state and our communities, our culture. But at the same time, what I often hear is that policies, workforce policy, they're built to be inclusive. It says that they're inclusive of all. And then it kind of stops there. Instead of thinking a little bit further and realizing that, Well, what that means is that there might be a little bit of extra support that's needed, or a program might not be designed in a way that does actually reach and serve folks. So from a state agency perspective, I could say that that has been a very interesting thing that I engage with. It has really changed and transformed my work and strategy at the state level. From the employer perspective, the community-based organization perspective, this is where I'll be echoing Steve very much. Our network of immigrant serving organizations is strong. It's diverse. We have organizations and stakeholders across the state that we work with and collaborate with and really hear from. And when we're hearing from them, especially on the workforce side, employer engagement is really kind of always the leading question, right? How do we get in touch with folks? How do we kind of convince them, if you will, about welcoming global populations or global folks with global backgrounds onto their teams? And that really includes the full entire job cycle, right? From recruiting, like identifying who's in their areas, all the way through the hiring process to the middle management if someone is hired, and then up into the upskilling phase as well. So, yeah, as I said, I'd be really echoing Steve there, and I think I did. But employer engagement is a big deal, and it's a challenge for a lot of organizations, including at the state level for us as well. And I'm, thinking through strategies all the time. How can we make this, systemically built within our work so that we're complementing and supporting the work of stakeholders across the state?
Echo. I fully agree that I think what we always keep in mind at labor agency is, workforce development does not work without industry participation, and industry playing a huge role. So fully support the positions that Steve and Anthony took. I think to pivot to a slightly different approach, thinking about in California, some of you may be aware, we're having a particularly difficult economic era in the past couple of years. So one of the things that we've been thinking through is, well, when we have limited resources, when we have a federal government that is not going to provide us the same resources for workforce development, what can we do? How do we continue to address the needs that our industry partners are telling us they need for their workforce? How do we address the needs of the workforce population that is there, that is available, right? We all are aware that there are plenty of immigrant workers here who are underutilized, right? That is the purpose of this platform. So one of the things that we've really been pushing for, and this seems like an obvious thing, but is collaboration across agencies. So much of our state work and so much of what happens ends up in these silos. So, for example, the California Health and Human Services Agency had an effort around addressing the healthcare workforce, and then labor agency had an effort, and then GoBiz, and I was like, wait, we should all be working together. We should all develop one approach. We should push for joint funding, and that ultimately resulted in, again, I can talk about it a bit more, in a collaborative large funding pool for us to be able to address those needs. Another thing is to really look at the existing resources in the workforce development system. So I think community colleges in particular are super underutilized. And thinking through how we can work with community colleges, how we can work with their ability to reach populations in to reach those immigrant populations. I feel like there are often places where the adult education system interacts, and because English language learning is so critical for immigrants, many of them do connect with the community college system. So that is a space where we can really look to building that bridge program. How do we get people into those spaces where they're learning English, and then also putting them into that vocational training? And that leads me to also think about, we've made a huge push to go back to centralizing or focusing in on integrated English and training, and really thinking about how the delivery of services, the best way to get people into the jobs that they want, that our industry needs, is, or particularly for immigrant populations, is to ensure that we're delivering both that English language learning with the vocational training at the same time. So that has been a huge focus of ours in terms of how we address the needs, and thinking through what are the best practices, how can we make this as quick as possible, and how can we leverage the limited resources that we have to ensure that we are addressing these needs.
Thanks, Sebastian, and thanks everyone for answering that question. Some big themes that I kind of wrote down as we were talking. Big one being employer engagement, and I think Anthony said it right. It is always when you're working on the practitioner side of this work is really the place where folks want to build those bridges. And I think Steve and Anthony have done amazing jobs, and so lots to learn from both of you. And then, just the breaking of silos, whether it's within government, Sebastian, for you with this, with interagency collaboration, or within your own ecosystem or community. And then a little bit about using existing resources. Community colleges, I agree with you, are always a great opportunity. Definitely something I think for folks in New Jersey to consider as well. And then in addition to that, integrated English training, which, is a proven best practice, but also sometimes difficult to support. So those are some really great themes that came out, just taking some notes. But I did want to focus in a little bit. I know we're running a little behind time, so I'm going to just pick maybe one or two more questions. But one I really wanted to get to, it drives a little bit off of the employer engagement conversation, and this is really a question for any or all of you. We all know that the climate around immigration is quite different nowadays than it has been. A lot of us have been in this work for a long time, and the narrative, national narrative, has really shifted a lot in the past few months. And that climate around immigration, is that affecting at all how you're working with partners? And particularly, does it affect how you're talking to employers? I think we see really clearly from the data displayed here today, the impact that immigrant workers have on local economies. You've all done quite a bit of this work in the past. So is there anything you're doing differently or anything that's changed in these conversations because of the current climate? And if it has, what are some strategies folks could think about here in New Jersey?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. So I'll say yes and no. So yes, I would say it has changed how I'm engaging with employers, and really it's changed how employers are engaging with us. Lately, the conversations that I've been having really are with employers are around fear of shutting down their businesses, fear of because they're losing their workforce, and then and then requesting to be speaking with me in anonymity as well. So fear is a serious thing that I am seeing as a transition with employers. When they do speak with me, they are making it very clear that they only can hire folks who have employment authorization, and that is said repeatedly in the same conversation, which I find to be really quite interesting and would be a bigger conversation for a different day. But I would say employers engaging with us, that is the biggest change that I've seen from the climate is the fear. But at the same time, there are critical gaps in our field. So something that I have done to continue using is I've built or to continue to use to facilitate the conversation and move it along. I built a webinar series called Working with New Americans from Recruiting to Upskilling. That's a 3-part series. I put it on YouTube. It's up for free. And I built it for employers, and it really covers every single topic and step of the job cycle. And it really can serve and hit points for folks who are low English speaking entry level job seekers, or all the way up to people who are highly trained professionals, high English speakers, and have been placed in a job already, but might be experiencing some upskilling challenges, or their employers who are engaging with them might be experiencing challenges in how they can work with them. So that's where I see the change has been. And then what I'll say no is that, I learned many years ago that I need to speak the language of business, right? So that means utilizing economic data, HR language and data around attrition, around job retention, with immigrants, obviously focusing on immigrant job placement and immigrant employees. And those, using those, I guess, speaking to the bottom line, right? Now, that's not to say that employers don't care about their employees. I'm having those conversations because they do care, right? But a lot of times when I'm engaging with folks for the first time, or a group of employers through an association or chamber for the first time, a great entryway into taking it to the next step is using that kind of bottom line language. That really helps me move the conversation forward. I would say that my recommendation on that front, within terms of employer engagement, one of the best things that I've seen work across the country, and is connecting employers with employers, right? By connecting them with an employer who has done this before, right? Who has hired an immigrant or a group of immigrants and it's going well. It creates a sense of safety, a psychological safety for the employers. And it's like, okay, if they can do this, then we can do this. And honestly, it looks like we're missing out on some pretty good talent. So that works as a strategy. I've seen that work from communities small to large, really in states across the country. But yeah, so that using that economic language is the great way into the conversation, and then helping it move forward is, I think, connecting those employers, and making people helping people understand that it's completely possible, and it's more than possible. It's actually advantageous, right? And a lot of data that Steve spoke to, is represented today, represents that clearly.
Thanks, Anthony. Steve, I wonder if you would touch on some of the campaign work you're doing with employers. I know you put something in the chat, but would you want to expand on that?
Sure. Well, one is that, yes, it's been an issue. We're seeing employers saying they're not interested in the talent pool. And, we've had to reemphasize that, first of all, during the whole Trump first term, people who were work authorized, were still work authorized, and that was true for a long time until the last couple months under this term, even that work authorized folks were not directly impacted by the several hundred federal proclamations on immigration that came out. But we've started a training for employers about, in particular, how to comply with the law. We do this with chambers, often with, I would say probably a lot of participants who have voted for Trump and want to see enhanced immigration enforcement, but also don't want to see their business disrupted. So we walk through just, again, we get an attorney, usually an AILA member and the American Immigration Lawyers Association. I'm sure you have a New Jersey chapter, and the person asking about can somebody assist smaller companies? I would encourage you to reach out to AILA New Jersey attorneys who can help you walk through how to use the H-1B program. And we talk through I-9 forms. We talk through Social Security Administration no match letters. But we also talk about ICE raids and how to prepare for them. And if you're a retailer, like, you don't necessarily need to let law enforcement into your office to rifle through your papers or shut down your kitchen, in the middle of the day with a raid, right? Like, there are private areas. So anyway, we do those trainings. We bring a lawyer, we help explain to people. And we, of course, as I mentioned before, at foreignimmigration.biz, we encourage businesses to speak out. I will say that, one of the things that happened the last couple of months, I'm sure you saw the headline, there was a $100,000 fee overnight slapped on the H-1B program. Honestly, they're GM, Ford, Henry Ford Health System, they're not here today, so I feel okay talking about them. But those are 3 of our top 5 users of the H-1B program directly impacted by this. And in the week that local reporters wanted to report on the impact of this, essentially they said no comment. And I sort of have a couple of responses to that. If the most frequent users of these programs and these talent pools are unwilling to talk about their importance and value to the economy, I think you should expect that the detractors of those talent pools and those programs are going to win. We're not going to win and protect these programs if you're using them and you're unable to speak out. And if you're unable to speak out because you're fearful of retribution about expressing your opinion, that's a different conversation and a very profound one that I want you to think about. I understand you may need to look out for the bottom line, and you may make a decision that you're not willing to speak out in this environment. But I want you to ruminate on that, because that's not an America that is going to support a strong economy and a strong business community into the future. We need to be a place where businesses can speak up for what they need in the community, and that should be okay. And so that's just some of the work that we're doing in response to this moment. I don't know how Sebastian's working with employers.
Sebastian, feel free to add to that as well.
I'd be repeating a lot of what Anthony and Steve said, but I think what I will add is, I think we've seen it as an opportunity. to really kind of focus in with employers about, okay, the federal government is taking this position on immigrant talent, on immigration generally. What can the state do? How can we work with the state? And I think it's been an opportunity for us to really kind of reconnect with employers, again, lay out for them, this is how we can work with you all to continue to address the needs that you have, and how we can continue to use our workforce system to continue to support the state's economy. So it has been, I mean, I think, again, people are on edge. There's limitations, there's restrictions, there's less funding, but it has been an opportunity for us to really kind of focus in on what are the things that the state is doing at the moment to continue to address the needs of our industry partners and ensuring we have a strong economy.
Catherine,
Thanks,
I should add
Sebastian.
one thing just because of this group. In January of 2022, there were a number of regulations passed by the Biden administration that are still in effect today that relate to higher skilled talent. So pathways for people of extraordinary talents called the O1 visa, the national interest waiver, those were completely broadened. And so there are some high skilled visas that have not been fully utilized, that don't have caps on them, that I would encourage people to talk to immigration attorneys, that if you're feeling frustrated, this is only in the high skilled context. Certainly, there are all kinds of other problems, but there are some opportunities that I think businesses can tap into.
Thanks, Steve. And just a reminder, we only have a couple minutes left. So if you have any additional questions, I think we've answered a lot of them in the chat. One I did want to touch on really quickly earlier, as somebody mentioned, difficulty in nurses and getting nurses credentialed in the US. And just to say that I'll put a link in the chat for a really great program in our neighboring state of New York that really supports internationally trained nurses with contextualized instruction for the NCLEX exam. But in addition to kind of programmatic fixes to support nurses, there are also some different reforms that states are using around some of the examination requirements for nurses. And so happy to talk offline about that. Or I know there's a lot of that work happening in your states as well, but there's quite a bit happening in that. And I think New Jersey certainly could do more there as well. I think we only have about 5 minutes left. Any other questions that folks want to put in the chat, or I might plant a final one, but I do want to give everybody a second to chime in. I think we've definitely covered most. I think given the time that we have left, I might just maybe end on kind of a high note. We had, a lot of really great information shared here, and I'll make sure we put that together. But I would just love to hear about, in the past year or two, what's one achievement that, you're really proud of in the work that you've done, or something that you think folks in New Jersey could learn from. You've already mentioned quite a bit, so maybe something you haven't had a chance to chat about as we close out.
Just because it's top of mind, we're about to issue our Global Entrepreneur in Residence Impact Report. This is a program, I mentioned New Jersey's about to launch theirs. We launched in 2019. To date, we've had 22 startup founders in the program. And since the program started, those founders have raised $38 million in venture capital and created 194 technology-based jobs. These are high-paying jobs. It's been a huge economic development producer, and I think it stands against any other startup program the state is funding. Of our founders, 90% are people of color, 50% are from grossly underrepresented communities in the startup community, being women, Latinx, Black, or Middle Eastern founders. And so we're eager, the return on investment on that has been phenomenal. We're running the most expensive model you can, and it's about $25,000 to $30,000 per year per founder. And so I'm excited to see what New Jersey is going to create. I know it's at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and I think Randolph University is that the name of it. And so we're excited to work with them and see how they progress it.
Awesome. Anthony or Sebastian?
Sebastian, go ahead.
Sure. I do want to highlight, because they talked about some of the things that we've been trying to do. We were able to get a a one-time $130 million investment from the state, from the state budget, where it called for us to work with the chancellor, the community college chancellor's office, with the Department of Education, with Cal HHS to develop that guidance to adult education consortia to develop those pathways for to support the healthcare and care economy workforce. And that specifically called for using to expand the uptake of integrated education and training. I think that is such a great best practice that California had kind of moved away from for a bit, even though I think we had helped develop it. But it has really allowed us to develop expand IET in the 25 different sites across the state. We've been able to start building out these programs. And then I think the most important thing is we've also set aside dollars for those wraparound supportive services for individuals. So that provides navigation support, that it provides support for people to navigate how to register for classes, how to address childcare needs that they might have, how to address transportation needs. So I think it's really been a great opportunity for us in the state to look at a problem, analyze what are the needs, and then actually be able to deliver and deploy those dollars is it's a great thing in state government when you're actually able to address a problem and find funding to do that. So I really want to highlight that work that our healthcare team has been doing.
That's amazing. And Anthony, a last 2 minutes over to you to talk about
Yeah,
anything.
sure. Thanks, Catherine. I guess I want to highlight again the Global Talent Task Force report and the results and recommendations that came from that. That was a couple of years ago, but now it's moving into a next steps with that, where we're hopeful to be presenting some potential policy in our next legislative session, with a focus on addressing licensure and regulated occupations. So a lot of different strategies are being taken across the country, looking at provisional licensure as an option, licensure by endorsement, the international medical graduate programs, and all the different strategies that have been proposed and now are being implemented through state policy across the state, in which I think it's now over half of the 50 states have some form of international medical graduate program going on. The success of that program has been amazing, and now looking into other avenues through policy to make sure that we are supporting and creating pathways similar to IMG pathways and healthcare pathways. That's what we're looking to into the future, and we're hopeful for. I would just like to close with saying, kind of repeating what Sebastian said, and when I have time to not be caught up in the news of every day, and focus really on my work, I'm in the same place as Sebastian, and I'm looking at opportunity right now. I see opportunity. I carry the belief and message to employers, to workforce folks across the state that immigrants are going to be a part of this country. Right now, we're in the middle of a lot of turmoil around reform, right? But I hold faith in the belief that immigrants are going to be, a cornerstone of the United States moving forward. That means that in years to come, all of the work that we are currently doing and all the work that currently needs to be done, or that does still need to be done, needs to keep going, right? We have such a great outlook in terms and huge opportunity when we look at the numbers when we consider the brain waste numbers, the folks, as Steve said, the pharmacist who once was an Uber driver, right? There is just huge opportunity. And of course, in consideration of all the population data, aging trends, et cetera, that we can consider, the group that we know that we have that is a growing part of our great population in the United States are immigrants, right? And so many folks who are second, third, fourth generation who still are facing challenges. So the importance of keeping the ball moving, I suppose, through state policy, through engagement with employers, through supporting and complementing the work of strong and trusted immigrant organizations is really what gives me hope. And excites me now when like I said, when I'm able to pause and not look at the news, that's where I put my heart and mind into. And it really is exciting because I also can know that I can use that message that I completely believe is true, and it welcomes in folks from any, wherever they're at on the spectrum in terms of their ideology, political beliefs, etc. So I am hopeful. I am hopeful.
I love ending it on hope and opportunity. That's wonderful. Steve, Sebastian, Anthony, it's always wonderful to see you and have a conversation. I could do this for hours. But I do want to pass it over to closing to Kyle Sullender to close us out of this session. I think they'll be able to share contact information and slides with folks here. But just passing it off to Kyle. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Catherine. And really, thank you to everybody for joining us today, and certainly all of our participants. Again, my name is Kyle Sullender. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of the Business Immigration Coalition. I also serve on the committee that helped to plan today's event. I wanted to really quickly just share a couple of remarks before we close out today's program. First of all, again, on behalf of the entire board and all of our member organizations, I want to thank today's participants, our introductory speaker, Asma, Catherine for moderating, all of our panel members, and of course, Rachel from Choose New Jersey for helping to introduce things today. And then finally, a quick shout out to all of the staff at our partner organization, the New Jersey Business and Industry Association, for their behind the scenes work that maybe isn't as apparent to everybody when the program is running smoothly this morning, but I promise you that it is only doing so because of the work that they're doing behind the scenes. It's clear to me, and I suspect that it's clear to everybody who's joined us this morning, that there's still a lot of work that we need to do on the state level to help qualified immigrants fill labor shortages in our state and in our economy. And we consider, from a coalition perspective, this webinar to only be one of many steps to do that. And so some of our other goals that we would very much like to accomplish are things like forming a committee of stakeholders to work in this area. We'd also like to produce a detailed report on this topic. And I mention all of this because we would very much welcome hearing from other organizations who are willing to potentially devote some time and attention to these issues. And if you are part of an organization who would be interested in doing so, please reach out to us using the email that's now up on the screen. Finally, before we end today's program, I'd also like to put in a brief word for the coalition. I think the kids today call these shameless plugs, but we are extremely proud of what we've accomplished in just a few short years of our existence here at the Business Immigration Coalition. New Jersey is only one of a few states that has a business-oriented immigration coalition. And because we are committed to bipartisanship and evidence-based policy development, we have continued to attract many organizations with similar commitments throughout the state. We, it should be stated, we have recently acquired nonprofit status and are actually in the process of transitioning from an all-volunteer organization to one with core staffing. But that being said, our strength ultimately comes from the large number of organizations that are aligned with our mission. And for that reason, we continue to welcome new companies and associations to join our coalition at any time. If you are supportive of our work and represent a company or organization that might like to join the coalition, please, again, communicate with us using the email on the screen. Reach out to anyone on the board who's participated in this webinar today or in others. We'd be happy to make the right connections for you. And finally, it should be said that while we, of course, welcome contributions from our members, there is no fee or required contribution to be a member of the coalition. We simply pride ourselves on being a nonpartisan organization committed to the work that we're doing and the education that we do related to the immigration field. So with that, I will end by saying thank you again for joining us today. Once again, thank you to all of our speakers and panelists, and thank you for helping us to understand an important issue deserving of much more attention in the future, and that we hope to continue to dive into as a coalition in the future with your support. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.